All right, got my recording things going. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us on the Fantasy Golf Bike podcast. We are doing this through Twitter Spaces as well, so kind of a dual thing that we've got going on. So if you're joining us on Twitter Spaces, thank you. And if you're listening to us on the playback or on our podcast, thank you as well. We're going to be talking about the American Express this week in our podcast, what Drew and I like to do. We give you as good of plays as what we come up with from our models that we have on Fantasy Golf Bag and give you a little bit of a recap. We do it all in just about 30 minutes. Last week, we did it in just over 30 minutes, did our recap in 5. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the recap. This is how I start off. I take one player from the previous week. I turn to Drew and I say, Drew, how worried are you? Last week, I did Colin Morikawa after he obviously didn't pull through at the Tournament of Champions. And this week, I'm going to ask him about Jordan Spieth. We saw him get out to the first round lead at the Sony Open, only to pull a full Keegan. Drew, are we updating the name? Is it now going to be called the full Jordan, a full Jordo? Where are we going with this, and how worried are you about Spieth going forward?
I don't think we can update the name. I think I don't really have an equivalent for other sports, but yeah, I think it still has to be the full Keegan. But
I kind of agree there.
Be bestowed upon him a couple times. So he does get one. Yeah, I'm not too concerned. In the long term, the short term definitely is. I'm more concerned about that than the Morikawa from the Tournament of Champions. So I think the way he basically lost control. I mean, it was not something you want to see from a top priced and a top level guy. What I would want to see is riding the ship, maybe a little bit like Morikawa, like you can kind of bring it back home a bit. And he just completely went south. Like you would think in that position, you'd be able to get it home to at least make the cut.
Yep.
And then maybe, post a 65 or something over the weekend and maybe get back into it. But the way he essentially just made mistake after mistake and compounded mistakes, I'm not a big fan of that. So again, long term, I don't think this is like scar tissue for him. He probably was happy to go home.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But it is a bit concerning the way he essentially just completely spit the bit and compounded his errors one after another.
Yeah, disappointing to see, especially from a top price guy. It's one thing if he was 8,300 or whatever he was at the Tournament of Champions.
Yeah.
But he was 10-1 and the anchor of a lot of lineups. And certainly if he gets through, much better chance. So also very disappointed there. Next point I wanted to talk about was Siwoo Kim. Going into Sunday, Drew, he's really the only proven winner on the leaderboard. Was a plus 850 number. I know some people around the industry got it. You brought him up prior to the week, but still, I think there's maybe a broader indication I wanted to bring up with you. It's of course a little hard to peg golf, but being the only proven winner going into Sunday certainly seems to have proven off a couple of times over the last year or two.
Yeah, I don't know. I know the narrative was the players, 8 out of 10 or whatever it was, had won the week prior or had played at the Tournament Champions.
Yep.
Maybe it's something with prior winners winning at the Sony Open. It seems like that's maybe closer to what we see here every week or every year. So, yeah, I think there is a lot to be said for these guys. If it's their first time out trying to get it done, it's tough. I think Buckley did a very good job for the most part. I was very surprised. I pulled up stats from last year, and he finished final round 65. And I was like, well, he can use a little bit of that for today's final round being on Sunday.
Yep.
And he did a very good job hanging in there. And he really kind of got snake bit by Siwoo chipping in and then being able to get up and down or hit a really good shot at the bunker on 18 to make a birdie to beat him by 1. But I do think there is something to be said for guys that have been there before. It's easier for them to finish it off. There's less pressure probably, but there's a lot of components. It's I think that's probably a narrative maybe we look at next year.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Last note I wanted to bring up, which kind of goes into this week a little bit, is I was watching the telecast, or afterwards, I should say. I watched the telecast and then a little bit afterwards. Johnson Wagner, first of all, he's on the Golf Channel now. I don't know if you've been able to watch him or not, Drew, but he's got his full mustache going on. It's pretty great. I enjoy listening to him, and he's pretty knowledgeable, obviously. He was a good player in his own right, really good player. He seems to believe that Siwoo Kim is a total Bermuda specialist. The win at Sedgefield, the win at the Players, obviously at Sawgrass when it was that. So what do you make of that? Do you buy into that theory? Obviously, we know for certain golfers it does help, but what do you buy into the full theory of a guy being a specialist on one type of grass?
I think a relative specialist is probably better. And what I mean by that is I think Bermuda is probably the biggest differentiator between some guys being able to putt well on those weeks versus any other surface. Bermuda, and you're from Florida as well. It doesn't matter how low you cut it and roll it. The grain in Bermuda is just ridiculous, and some guys handle it a lot better than others coming from up north.
Yep.
So it does seem. I mean, I would never count them out of a Bermuda tournament or a bent grass tournament, but for sure, I think Bermuda has a lot more skill involved than any of the other surfaces. I think POA is more luck based to a degree, and then I do think Bent is probably the truest form. So yeah, I do think there's an actual reason behind his success in Bermuda. And again, I think it's relative to the field. He's just better. He can be better on that surface versus the field and other surfaces.
Yeah, I totally agree, and have this exact same philosophy. I grew up north, playing mostly bent, mostly POA, and I come down here and it's a totally different game around the green and on the green. It's on the green. It's mostly grain that you have to read, and bent, obviously, like you just said, it runs probably the truest out of all of them. So just different styles. Definitely think it matters, but these guys are so good. They should figure it out. I've been down here for like 6 years, and I'm on my same handicap as I was up there. So I guess I figured out the greens enough to maintain my level of play, which by all means is not that great, but not that bad either, I guess. Okay, top statistical standouts from last week that are playing this week and I think are relevant. I wanted to bring up with you. David Lipsky and Davis Thompson both hit over 50% of their approach shots last week on the positive side, and maybe on the negative side. A lot of buzz around this Taiga Semikawa guy. He completely lost his irons on Sunday. I think he had 13 bad shots. Maybe just go into the bad shot, good shot thing really quickly. Drew, you busted that out this past weekend for our showdown stuff.
Yeah, so pretty cool enhancement / simplification. So what we do with some of the approach stats is obviously it's broken out by different categories of strokes gained per shot. So 0.25 or gaining 0.5. But a lot of people don't know what that means. So what I did, I tagged up with Skylar Hoke, so shout out to Sky Hoke on the side, and we found out what the 75th percentile good shot is and what the 75th percentile bad shot is. And basically now we just summarize it and see how many shots a player hit that was technically good and technically bad. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to digest, I think. It's to me, even myself, the number is a number, but seeing, hey, he hit, I don't know, let's say 15% of his shots, he gained over 0.25. So, okay, what does that mean? Well, then I see he hit 7 good shots versus 3 bad shots. Now that makes sense. Makes a little bit more sense. So, just a way to simplify it. And again, it's using the actual baseline from the PGA Tour, that the 75th percentile for all good and the low, negative 75th percentile for the bad shot. So overall pretty easy, but a way to simplify and I think it's easy for you to talk golf, right? Just, hey, he hit, we could probably do a percentage, but you could say he hit 70% of his iron shots good versus bad.
Hit 14 of 18 approach shots really good. And I think that's really useful in showdown stuff. Now, again, on a day-to-day basis, we all know that anybody could go out and do it, but typically one will lead to the other, especially if they have a baseline of being pretty good in that specific statistic or yardage. So, all right, let's get into the Amex now. We'll talk about Lipsky and Thompson and Semikawa in these next couple of bits. So the Amex, 3 days for each golfer over 3 courses. All the courses are roughly 7,100 yards. All have 4 par 5s on them. It's going to be like a 7 or 8 undercut. It comes on Saturday night. It is still the top 65 ties. We're going to get like a 25 under winner roughly. We do have 156 players, but some really good ones. 5 of the top 10 and 10 of the top 20 with the rotation. One last thing is we're going to go from La Quinta to Nicklaus to PGA and vice versa of that. So if you start on PGA, you're going to La Quinta to Nicklaus and Nicklaus to PGA La Quinta. That's important for showdown purposes because La Quinta and Nicklaus are much easier. Now, if you guys read some other stuff, you'll already know that. But what you might not know is 50% of the approach shots, at least at PGA West and most of the time at Nicklaus and La Quinta, are going to come from under 100 yards or over 225 yards. So, Drew, we got a big-time wedge fest on our hands this week, which typically ends up turning out to be a big-time putting fest and a putting contest. Jon Rahm is notorious for saying that about this event. During the event, I don't know if you remember that little sound bit he gave us a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. Last year.
Yeah, was it last year? I remember it was really recently where he just kind of went off the handle.
Yeah, that was last year.
So, Wedge Fest, which ends up being a putter fest. Tell me a couple of golfers. You tweeted out a nice graphic earlier today about some guys that can light it up with the putter, getting at least a stroke and a half per round. Is that correct?
1.5 strokes per round, yeah, yep. And how often they did it. So yeah, I'll pull up the list. I actually just ran it off of 2 strokes just to get an idea. But yeah, the tweet is on my profile. You can go. It's one of the top ones. But I refreshed it and I pulled up percentage of two strokes putting per round and how often they've done it. Obviously, I'll give you a couple names, which a couple might be surprising and a couple may not be. May not be as Taylor Montgomery. So almost 33% of his rounds, he's gaining over 2 strokes putting.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and again, just to put context to that tweet, it's going to be a putting contest. We know that. And I just looking at how these guys performed as a winner and obviously finishing in the top 10, there's slightly different ways you can get it done. They still got to hit the ball well. So I'm not saying like, just focus on putting, but you got to have upside putting, which is the difference maker.
Yep.
Jon Rahm was tops. He was number 1 in 1.5 strokes putting per round at like 33 or 38%. It was pretty high, I think.
Yeah, actually, I think he just climbed over 40%. He was him and Harry Hall.
40%, yeah. Yep. And then at two strokes, it was 28%. The next one is Sam Burns, which is kind of surprising. Then it's Beau Hossler, Harry Hall, Alan Tarrant, guys that you wouldn't think of from a ball striking model perspective, but the putter can get hot. So if you're looking for a value, those might be the guys that you throw in there and get them really low owned. Then it's Troy Merritt, Andrew Putnam, who's done well here, and Brendan Todd, who's also not shy to make a few putts. But yeah, the tweet has, I think, the top 40 guys or top 30 guys, something like that, in 1.5 strokes and how often they achieve that per round, which is really interesting. Obviously, the low end is probably guys you want to stay away from. Again, it's just an upside thing.
Right, exactly. And we all know that us that play golf, anybody can get hot with their putter at any time. So now we'll talk about a couple of guys that have been really good with their wedges and or good from that, say, 225 to 275 yard bucket that a lot of these par 5 approaches are going to be on. So a couple of names, and this is the first name I want to start off with. It's really good. Xander Schauffele is number 1 when you put all 3 of those yardages together over the last 10 tournaments. But he's injured. So where do you stand? He's obviously thinks he's good enough to play in this event, but we took a really cautious approach at Kapalua. It paid off for you and I. Should we take the same approach here, or are you ready to play him?
I think the field's strong enough. It's not necessarily a play, at least for me. I pulled up, so we have a sheet called the Super Procs, which is like a course fit sheet, which is really interesting. It basically breaks out the yards. Obviously, this week with 2 of the courses not having strokes gained and not having laser data, it makes it a little bit more tricky. So I would point to Jason's proximity numbers there. We pulled a lot from, or at least what I pulled a lot from 150 to 175. A couple of the names that we've talked about recently, I'll just kind of swerve back here for a second.
Yeah.
Tom Hoagie is a guy that,
looks so
people
good
kind of
right
faded off of last week's or going to the national championship. I think he's back in play. He's very cheap relative to how well he's been playing. Another one is Stuart Sink, which is surprising. But so, again, it's a course fit model. It's just looking at approaches. You would want to look at driving and stuff like that as well. But that's where the Siwoo Kim number came from last week. He was number 2, I think, in the sheet. He's, again, tip tops this week. No surprise. But, yeah, you'll see a nice host of players. I mean, Ben Griffin, Adam Hadwin shows up, Tage Lee, Tom Hoagie, a lot of guys that you've been playing recently. So I think that's the thing. But to circle back again to Xander, to me, it's not really a play. He's obviously here. He's going to try to tee it up. But the field is so strong. It's not like if it was last week and he was playing and then your next choice is Sung J M and then the next choice is Tom Hoagie. Okay, I'm probably giving Xander a try.
Yep.
It's so strong here, and I don't see a need.
Right. What's the likelihood, I guess, and I even brought this up last week as saying, hey, you played Jordan Spieth because the guys around him could miss the cut. Well, they did end up missing the cut. This week, what's the likelihood of a Cantlay, Finau, Scheffler, Rahm missing the cut? Very, very, very unlikely. So,
yes.
I'm with you there. I'm with you on the waiting. I'm okay with that. Just a couple of names on the proximity numbers that I got from the FGB model. Of course, also everything that we have talked about, that Super Prox model, all that is part of our FGB, our Fantasy Golf Bag Premium Package, just $5 a week. So come on and check it out. Check out the data that we have, and of course the picks that we give from that data. So a couple of names. Andrew Novak is played pretty decently in his limited starts. Russell Knox, I know that you were interested in last week. He looks like he's been pretty good. And you mentioned Andrew Putnam already, and he put out a tweet earlier, said that every time he lands down in Palm Springs, he just gets a really good feeling. Again, I'm not saying that's going to translate into good success, but he has been pretty consistent here, as has Adam Hadwin. So how much stock do you put in that, and do you like either of the other names that I mentioned?
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre because I don't have Hadwin's form pulled up here. I'll pull it up.
Course form or
Hadwin's been playing recent form.
Recent form.
So
okay,
he hasn't played since the Houston Open, so it's like we don't have much to go off of. Which for me, when you first start the beginning of the calendar year, I'm not always eager to go back to that. But even with that being said, when I saw Adam Hadwin pop up here, same with Andrew Putnam, it's almost kind of like the chicken and the egg theory. Like, are these the actual proximities they play best at? And that's why they've had success here.
Yeah.
Or,
this could be
as the success here led to really good numbers that we include, there's a lot that goes into it. So I don't know. Hadwin obviously has great course history, but I really do hate, and that's probably one of my leaks, is if you have data from these guys last week and the week before, I'm more eager to play them than having some guy come in after 3 months or 2 months off, 3 months off almost. Even though that's probably very short-sighted because these guys don't just hang up the clubs and then show up. But for me, the course history is great, but I'll probably look elsewhere. Like for me, Hoagie's 200 above him, and we've seen what he's done the last 2 weeks. It's an easy play for me.
And if you want to talk about course history, I mean, how can you not mention Hoagie? 2-6 in 2 of the last 3 years. Now there's a miscut mixed in there as well, but
I like those.
Yeah, I mean,
I like the 2-4 over the MC. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
give me the upside.
Here's the thing: it was kind of before Tom Hoagie broke out, right? I mean, he was always pretty good statistically, and then finally got it together. Last year, and we saw what good of a player he really can be. No doubt about it. Nick Taylor played pretty good last week. Also, makes him pop up. Has a couple of good starts here. Let's see. You already mentioned Stuart Sink. How about Michael Thompson, the bearded Wonder Man over there? Is he going to make any lineups for you this week?
I don't think so. I think I have enough other options I can go to. Maybe your boy Carl Yuan I'll go back to.
Yeah, Carl Yuan. That's an interesting one. He had so many different streaks. I don't know if you've checked out his scorecard or had a minute or two to check it out. It's pretty ridiculous. He's got like 4 birdies in a row. We'll throw a bogey, throw 3 bogeys in a 4-hole stretch. Just crazy. But hey, it does add up to DFS points. I'm not going to lie. So that's not bad. Okay, let's go give a couple of bets and then some early DFS leans that we're going to build around. First, like I said, we've gone over the statistical stuff. Now we'll get into a couple of the plays that we've either taken from these statistical notes or just some feelings that we've seen. Speaking of hot putting, one thing that Justin Suh has done well since he's come back on tour and on the Corn Ferry Tour when he was down there last year was putt extremely well. Now, we don't have a ton of data on him, so he's not going to show up in your stats yet, Drew, but I think he's a guy that can break out. He went to Cal, so obviously familiar with the area. I love playing him here this week as one of those long shots. And what I've done is I've paired him up with Yuan, who we just talked about, and Austin Eckroat in a top 40 parlay. Now, those are, I know, a little different, but I could definitely be a little dangerous with those. I love targeting guys that are, say, around 250 to be a top 40 and putting 2 or 3 of them together. But Justin Suh is my number one in that category. Have any quotes or comments about him?
What was the name again?
Justin Suh.
He came up early in the week. I don't have any particular thoughts on him. I don't have any thoughts on him.
Okay. How about Austin Eckroat?
I'm not very impressed with his performance. So when I run a model for betting, he's pretty low down on potential probability to win, obviously.
Yep.
But his performances lately have not been great. So I'm not that interested to jump on the wagon just yet. I mean, he's got
a wacky swing. I don't know if you've seen it. It's not quite Matt Wolff, but it's getting close to Matt Wolff, and they were teammates after all in college. So I'm just interested to, I think I don't know if he's the same pupil as who's Wolff's coach. I always forget what's the guy's name.
Now I'm gonna draw a blank.
I know. I'll look it up. But nonetheless, have you seen his swing? Let me start with that. Have you seen Ekro's swing?
I can't picture it. No. So I think I have, but I can't picture it. No.
Gankis, by the way, Gankis. That's the name. I knew it was a George, and I wanted to say Severikis, but that's the guy from Golf Channel. So, anyways, okay.
Yeah. So my issue with Ekro. So I just pulled up his profile. So obviously played well last week. Didn't do a lot spectacular. But even prior to that in the fall, I would argue it's pretty weak fields, and he's got T64, 54, 60th miscut, T38 miscut. Like the upside hasn't been great, and again, that can always switch. He did pretty well in the Korn Ferry Tour, but it's a pretty top heavy field this week. So
it is.
That's what I meant by I'm not eager to jump on the wagon for like super cheap guys, and especially if they haven't showed upside of late. Like there's some guys that are underpriced in my opinion, that 7 and 8K range that I don't want to get crazy. And this is a way stronger field than we've seen in years past. It used to be Cantlay shows up or Rahm, and
maybe one of two, and they're going against Abraham Ancer and Adam Long, right? Yeah. Speaking of,
that's just my mentality this week. Is there's some guys I just don't see if they can't have. Then again, they can always turn around. But the upside in the fall swing, it's not there. I don't see a lot happening this week.
Yeah, another maybe college tie, if you will. I mean, I don't know how close it is proximity-wise. I guess I could look it up while we're talking. But you've already tweeted about him this week, and this is the thing about jumping on numbers early. Your first tweet of the week after numbers came out was Sahith Theegala 55-1. I think you found it on DraftKings, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Really good to get in there early. I think that number, at least on FanDuel, was down to 40-1. So pretty significant difference for you. Tell me what you like about Theegala. I like pretty much everything, but tell me what maybe it was just the number that excited you, or maybe a little bit more.
No, I mean, the upside is there. To the same point of Ekro, of a guy that I'm not that eager to get behind. Sahith is a guy that shows a lot of upside. I think he had a handful of top 10s last year when he came on the tour. And then in the fall, he's played well with, I think, 3 top 10s. So, again, upside, it's a strong field, but I could see him contending in this type of event. A low-scoring event. We've seen him get hot with the putter. He's a good enough ball striker. He's drives it okay. If anything, he gets a little bit squirrely, but these fairways aren't hard to hit. And usually the rough is so dormant, it's kind of a joke. Like we joked last year about some of the rough stats because the ball sits up. It's almost a better lie than the fairway sometimes. So,
oh my God. I remember talking to you about this. Yeah. It may only be 60% fairways hit in regulation, but if you miss the fairway and you're close to it, you're within 5 yards. Sometimes it's honest to God a better lie than what you get in the fairway.
Especially on the par 5s, you try to launch something in there. So I saw that a few times, guys. They weren't intentionally missing the fairway, but if they missed it, they had a better lie with the long iron.
Right. They're like, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's my biggest flaw with him is if it's a really accurate golf course, accuracy off the tee is important. I would probably shy away from him. But this course, I really feel like it sets him up. Like he can go low, make a bunch of birdies. Driving, he should be fine. Irons are good enough. It's just a matter of having a good week. And honestly, he's cheap enough. The value was there at 80-1, I think it was when it first hit. I really do like, or I think it was 60-1.
Yeah, I remember seeing 55 or 60-1 is what you tweeted.
Yeah, I think it was 60. So I really do like the number right when it popped up because that was a guy I was expecting a little bit lower. Everyone else is so bunched up at the top. So that was a good one.
Let's talk about 2 Cams now. I have written down because I am interested in this week. Cam Young at 21-1. We'll be heading to Saudi Arabia for the Saudi International. Him and Cam Champ and a couple of other PGA Tour players. Hopefully that's not an indication of what's to come. Nonetheless, he's 21-1 and Cam Davis is 41-1. Cam Davis had a 3rd place here a couple of years ago, and Cam Young, it's only a matter of time before he breaks through. So you like him here, or do you think he'll avenge his 2nd place at the Genesis and win at a course like that?
It could be both.
Yeah, it could be. Once
the
doors are off, right?
It's same point with the driving. I mean, he can bomb it, and there's really no penalty for missing fairways. So going low is
what he does.
One of his specialties.
Yep.
And even at the British Open, when he shoot He went super low. So, yeah, I'm behind all the camps. I made a lineup earlier. I was joking with some guys. They had a core of 3 Taylors. Things like Nick Taylor, Taylor Montgomery, etc.
Yeah.
And then the Cams.
The Cams, yeah.
Cam
plus Taylor squared, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's just, again, it's a great course fit. Numbers look good, and they can get off the putter, which is important.
When do you start to get nervous about the ownership with Cam Young? Early steam, I can't imagine he gets over 25%, but if you're playing your single entry lineup with him in there, what ownership do you get nervous about? And where would you directly pivot off of him in that type of ownership?
Let's see. At 9,100.
Because we can also talk about something you and I have discussed a lot about ownership, right? It's okay to put a 25% owned guy in there if, right, we find that low owned guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It drops your uniqueness down pretty quickly. So yeah, I wouldn't be hesitant at his price. If it was higher price, then I feel like you're giving up some equity.
Yep. Paying
up with the ownership, like you're paying up and you're paying for more ownership, which doesn't make sense. So Cameron Young at 9,100. 25% I'd be fine with. 30% is probably, it depends on what they're right around them, but I would probably max it at 30%. Anything above that, I'd probably fade. But I'm good with, in cash, I probably wouldn't even care.
Wouldn't care. Yeah. Yeah, if you're going that route. Okay, let's do
I do have a question for you in terms of cash, which I was talking to a couple guys in the Discord, so I wanted to kind of pick on them a bit. So we had a Fantasy Golf Bag member last week that pretty much had the optimal through Sunday, and I think he ended up finishing probably first or second into every cash contest.
Yep.
He did not enter that into a GPP. And I explained to him, why don't you just enter that into a GPP? At least take a chance at, 100x. Mm-hmm. Give yourself some upside. You just hand built your lineup. You put a lot of thought into it. Yep. Oh, well, cash lineup never wins. Well, I disagree, especially with golf. Maybe, MLB makes sense. Football, probably right. But golf, what's your take? Cash lineup, you got to enter it into the GPP. It doesn't have to be the $15 or the $20 if you don't want to, but at least put it into something. Put it into something that gives you some more upside than doubling your money.
So here's the way I look at it. If I'm playing cash or a cash lineup, it's my best lineup that I can put in there, and I want that lineup in every contest that I am entering that week.
It's like an optimal. You think of it as an optimal lineup.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's not a cash or a GPP. I try to get away from that stigma because I feel like you can fall into traps by saying, oh well, Justin Suh is not a cash play because he's 7,200 and, he's unproven. Well, if he ends up in the optimal this week, doesn't really matter where he plays. Now, that's just a random name that I threw out there. But would I play him in what I would consider my optimal lineup this week? Yeah, I wouldn't be against it if it fit for sure. So
yeah, I do think too, to the terminology, you're right. Because if I was building a quote unquote cash lineup, I would probably be more inclined to say, oh, all these guys are high owned, but that's fine because it's cash. So you just have to eat the chalk. Well, if it's an optimal lineup, I'm thinking, he's going to be high owned. I can probably pivot to this guy who has probably as much upside, and I'm not going to get as much ownership. So an optimal thinking does switch off of that cash mentality of, well, you just have to eat all the chalk. Well, that's especially golf. Everyone knows the volatility on the cheap guys.
Yep.
But even the top guys. I mean, Tom Kim would have been cash lock last week, and he missed the cut. So
yeah.
But yeah, I felt bad for the guy. He said he made a couple pivots with his other GPPs, and they were 5 of 6, but his 6 of 6 would have just completely smashed. And who knows? I mean, you have your one hand build. You do well in cash, but maybe you win something for like 5,000, and that sets you up for the whole year, and you're freewheeling. So you just man, if I'm hand building something, let me throw it into something I can hit on. If it just happens to be the nuts.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, even look at the single entry stuff, even just focusing on that, which typically pays a little bit more than a large field GPP does in terms of the percentage of the field. And of course, you're not going up against guys that are putting in 150. It's just guys that are putting in one lineup versus your one lineup. So
exactly. Yeah. So I want to throw that out there because I was taken aback by that. But yeah, like I said, I think in MLB, obviously a cash lineup doesn't make sense. You'd have to hit every home run, and it's just stacking is the way, but you can't stack in golf. And I feel like the way to go is play it in everything. You hand build it, put the time in.
Play it in everything you can. Yep, play it in everything that you're playing in, 100%. So, all right, I think a really interesting range is and I want to have you rank them, and we're coming up on about a half hour. So that's typically like what we like to go. And then we'll turn to the audience, see if the audience has any questions before we go. But I see Cam Young. We just talked about him, right? 9,100, but he's about 20 to 1 to win. But you got Cam Davis, who's $300 cheaper, but basically double the odds. So is that a situation where maybe you play Cam Young in DraftKings and take advantage of that good price, don't care about ownership, and maybe bet Cam Young at 40 to 1, or maybe just do both with both? I guess is what I'm asking. It's such a big disparity between guys that are only separated by 300 on the salary board.
Yeah, again, you're asking that from a betting side with DFS, like you're trying to see how you would pair them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Cameron Young, if I was making a GPP lineup, Cameron Young probably wouldn't go into the big GPP as the ownership, because you can pivot down to any of these guys. Cam Davis is a great play. I talked about Sahith, and you're getting them for less than half the ownership. That's the way to go for me. Even going back to Siwoo, who's 1 year before, we have him under 7%. So
it's that weird stigma.
Cameron Young would not be the play.
Yeah, it's that weird stigma that people don't want to play.
So I think what you're asking, though, is like, would you bet them and probably fade them in DFS? And that's probably the way I would go. Like, if I really do, like, depending on the contest, and again, if he was doing an optimal build, maybe I play him and Cam Davis and Siwoo, whoever it is. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do that. But certainly in, like, the big GPPs, just the pivots around that, you could save some salary, and you're cutting down the ownership so much. So it allows you to pay up for a Jon Rahm, who is obviously there's a lot of good players in this field, but he's the one that I was really surprised with is putting. So I really do think he has probably the best chance of getting it done this week with the putter he's shown in the last year.
Yeah, that's the kind of the unfortunate part about Scheffler's game right now. That's the only part that's missing. Everything else looks pretty decent, but the putter just has not woken up yet. Finau, we know it's always an issue. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 rankums. One, rank the top 4 guys in the field: Rahm, Scheffler, Finau, and Cantlay, the way that you want to play them in DFS. And then the next 4 are going to be Wise, Cam Young, Taylor Montgomery, and Cam Davis. They're all priced right next to each other. You can pick either 4 first, and then I'll do it after that.
Okay. I think for the top, it would definitely be paying up for Rahm.
Okay.
Then it would be dropping down to Cantlay. Unfortunately, they're both going to be pretty high owned.
Yep.
And then honestly, I do think Scheffler is probably ahead of Tony Finau for me.
Yep.
In this field. So that'd be the 4.
I'm perfectly aligned there. I'm Rahm, Cantlay, Scheffler, Finau. Probably pretty equal on the ownership. I don't know if I'll be that much difference between the 4.
Yeah, I don't mind spreading it out. I'm just saying Rahm and Cantlay will be more popular than Scheffler and Finau by a little bit.
Yep.
It's not a huge amount, but just point that.
Yep. And then the next one is Cam Young, Wise, Montgomery, and Davis. This is a tough one. I'm not going to lie. This one's a little tougher. Aaron Wise, he intrigues me because he's certainly gotten more comfortable with the broomstick, right, with the long putter. So if he's going to be the lowest owned, I have no problem going to him first.
Yeah, I've been looking at Wise all week. Montgomery I still keep seeing value on him, and it's a lot of it's putting. But if he's going to keep doing it, it's kind of like the old speed. I hate to throw speed.
Yeah, no, but seriously, you just stick with it.
I mean, if that might just be his game.
And it translates so well on the PGA Tour. I was thinking about that before I came on. If you're a great putter and can hit the ball at least semi-consistently, you've got a spot on the PGA Tour for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think actually, so with the ownership, it does change things, but I would rate it Young, Montgomery, then Wise.
Okay.
But I think when you throw in the ownership narrative or angle, it does shift to Wise ahead of those 2. I think Wise has almost as much upside as Montgomery.
Yep.
And probably similar upside to Cam Young for less than half the ownership. So, and who knows? It could be that people play Cam Young and everyone drifts off of Wise and Montgomery, and they get even lower. So,
yeah, I love having them all priced together. I think you're going to end up getting a good one. Okay. All right, let's. We're coming up on about 36 minutes. If anybody in the audience wants to talk to us or ask us any questions or has any input on the golf course that they'd like to add, go ahead and just request to be a speaker now, and I'll get you in there. But in the meantime, I want to talk about just a couple of people priced from 7,400 to 7,100, Drew, before we get on out of here, just to balance out the lineups a bit. And first up is Will Gordon. He's a guy that we saw break through at the Travelers Championship a couple of years ago, then went back to the Korn Ferry, now back on the PGA Tour, and has done very well since coming back. In fact, hasn't missed a cut, it looks like. Yeah, hasn't missed a cut all season. T28 last week with a bad Sunday after a good Saturday. That's the first name. I really like him. Like, I can score. If you can put 4 rounds together, he'd be great. So Gordon, Steven Yeager, David Lipsky, and S.E. Kim. Of those 4, do any really pop out to you?
S.E. Kim or S.H. Kim?
S.H. Kim. I don't know why DraftKings has it as S.E. Oh, just because it's the first 2 letters. It's definitely S.H.
Okay.
And that's the other thing, dude. I hate how DraftKings and the PGA Tour have different names for these guys. It really bothers me.
Yeah.
Like, it's K.H. Lee, not Kyung-Hoon Lee. It's S.H. Kim, not Sung Hyun Kim. At least that's what the PGA Tour tells us. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I have several comments for name matching for this. It's still not as bad as basketball, where they take periods off and then they take the junior off or the third or whatever.
Oh man, that's got to be so bad. I don't get into basketball, dude.
Which is surprising. You think there would be more thirds?
Yeah, no, there's not. Right,
just Kirk the third.
Yeah, Davis Love is gone, so
I know.
Thank goodness on that.
I'm
go ahead,
right there with you with Ben Griffin. Love him this week. He was one of the ones I tweeted out, 80-1.
Yep.
As a first click. S.H. Kim is fine. I don't think he's going to pop for anybody. He's almost like a mini Taylor Montgomery. He just somehow is able to score. He's making cuts. And I'm actually pretty impressed with him. I don't mind going back to him. He's a little bit expensive for me this week, but I still don't hate it if you're going to ride a guy that's just getting it done.
I missed something last week. I was switching back and forth between football and golf, and there was periods where I was probably off for about a half hour off of golf. So did something happen with Sung Hyun Kim where people fell in love with the guy last week? Did some celebration or something? I don't know. My mom even texted me about it, so I feel like I missed something. Did you pick up on anything?
I did not. I must have missed it.
All right, I'm gonna have to really look this up. I meant to ask you before we came on because I don't know what happened. But anyways, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, he's averaging almost like a stroke around putting. So it's almost I don't know what Montgomery's averaging. But yeah, it's just he's doing other things fine too. It's just a little bit more volatile. But I don't mind going there, especially on this tournament. Lee Hodges is interesting. 3rd place last year, coming back. I think it's the first time he's played since the fall swing, I believe.
Yep.
So I don't mind going there. And then obviously Lipsky had a good showing last week, so he's probably going to be a bit popular.
Davis Thompson's a guy that you and I like. The talent profile. Do we like him here at this course?
The level at this course, yes. Yeah. Davis Thompson is a perfect fit. He's very long. He can get the putter going. He can get hot with the putter. This is a Davis Thompson style course, so he'll be in a lot of my lineups. It's a good one to name.
Awesome. All right. Before we get on out of here, again, I just want to recap really quickly for all of you that are not FGB members what we offer. First, I have a PGA DFS customizable model, which has 8 different components that you can go and change the weightings of. It is based off of course history, recent form, strokes gained, all the different statistical measures that you'd want in there. Then Drew has the FGB mixed model that includes the PGA Spectrum data that breaks it down on a shot level basis. Some really great stuff. And then, of course, if you don't want to go into the stats, you're not a stats guy, we offer our picks article every single Wednesday that gives our entire allocations and our entire player pools for the week. Basically, we can't ever, of course, give away lineups, but we get you pretty darn close to what we're going to have. In fact, there have been a couple of times, especially in the single entry stuff, where I have been having the same lineup as some other of the subscribers, and I'm totally fine with that. That is 100%. If you could figure out what I'm going to do, that's all for it. That's why I put it there. So we're going to do this every Thursday. I'm sorry, not every Thursday. Every week. Sometimes it's going to be just a podcast. Sometimes it's going to be a Twitter space. Sometimes it'll be a live stream. We like to change it up here and see what you all like. So until next week, everybody, good luck at the American Express, and we'll see you Drew, we got the Farmers next week in San Diego, right?
Yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, that's a great one. So good luck, everybody, this week, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.